It has been a while since I covered some good old-fashioned alien sightings. I've had a lot of really bizarre stories on my to-do list for a long time, and today I want to go over sightings of what eyewitnesses believed were alien robots, or in some cases just very bizarre-looking alien beings. We have a ton of stories out there that just sound crazy, but these eyewitnesses seem to really believe that they'd encountered something from out of this world. And today, I'm going to go over some of my favorite stories. One bizarre encounter with something out of this world happened in 1975 in Japan. One night, a man whose name I'm sure I won't be able to pronounce was working at a landfill when he noticed something bright about 100 yards away from him that was just floating in the sky. And as he was looking, wondering what the heck this thing was, he saw it take off at incredibly fast speeds back into space. Now this man was amazed, and he believed what he saw was a UFO. And the next day he told everybody about this sighting. He also wondered if anyone else had seen it, but he was the only one, or at least the only one who had ever come forward. He also claimed that after he saw this floating light, he experienced one of the worst headaches he had ever had. Now this man could not stop thinking about what he saw, and he wanted to see it again and get proof. So every night he went back to this area in hopes to see whatever this was again. And this time he brought with him 3 cameras. And it didn't take long, as about a week later he claimed he saw these strange lights again. But this time he was a lot closer and came face to face with something paranormal. On March 31st, he was at the landfill again watching the skies when he saw an odd-looking cloud forming about 100 yards or so away from him. He later described this cloud as an electric mist. And as this cloud was forming, he got another severe headache. But nonetheless, he got his camera ready and started taking pictures. Then, a figure emerged from this cloud and was moving right towards him. Now this eyewitness could not believe what he was seeing, and thankfully for us, he was still taking pictures. But when this entity, or whatever this was, got about halfway, it stopped, turned, then took off at incredibly fast speeds, just like it did before. Now, still to this day, almost 50 years later, and thanks to these pictures, UFOologists still talk about this case. Now, I'm sure most of us think that this encounter is nothing more than a simple hoax, but I do find it interesting that he felt the need to include that he got a headache. And for those that believe this man is telling the truth, they think that this could be an alien astronaut, or a time traveler, or maybe a multidimensional being, and that electric cloud that appeared in the sky was a portal or a rip into our dimension, and once it was open, this visitor came through. Now these pictures are fascinating, but what is really interesting about this case is just about a month before this sighting, 2 other people in another city claimed that they saw something very similar. While I was researching this story, one of the articles I read linked this encounter with a famous paranormal photo that was taken back in the 1960s. This photo shows what looks like an astronaut in the background. In 1964, a firefighter, Jim, took a nice little day trip with his family in England, and since it was a beautiful English day, he wanted to take some photos of his family. Now back in 1964, you had to go to a store to get the pictures you took developed. I remember when I was growing up, 1-hour photo booths were huge and they had these services in almost every store. And at the time, people were truly amazed that they can now get their photos fully developed in under an hour. But back in the early 60s, it took a lot longer than an hour, but when these pictures were ready to get picked up, Jim went to go get them. And the developer told him that this one photo of his daughter would have been great if there wasn't a man standing behind her. Now Jim was confused when he said that, but when he saw the photo, he was taken back. He clearly remembered that on that day, there was no one in this area. It was just him and his family. And he believes he would have remembered if someone was standing behind his daughter dressed like that while he was taking a photo. So Jim was freaking out. And because he was just so confused by this story started to spread. And even newspapers wrote articles about it. And today the story still remains extremely popular. Now I'm sure most of us think that Jim just wasn't paying attention and someone walked behind his daughter. But because of what this person is wearing and how convinced Jim was, it does make us wonder What if he is telling the truth, and we are being visited by beings that we can't see? And here's where things get even more interesting. Well, at least according to this article. Jim claimed that shortly after the newspaper published his story, two men dressed in black went to his house and asked him a lot of questions. They asked, or told Jim, to take them to the exact location where he took this photo. They also asked him questions about what the weather was like and how were the animals and birds acting, which Jim thought was extremely odd. And after he took them to the location, these two men tried to convince Jim to tell the public that in this picture it was probably just someone passing by. But Jim refused to do that, making these two men angry, and they just left him there. Jim had to walk all the way back home, which was about 5 miles. Another article I stumbled upon while researching this case pointed something out that is fascinating. At this time in this area, they just started making nuclear weapons at a power plant that was only a few miles away from this location. You can even see one of the towers in the picture. And I'm sure you guys know about how many UFO sightings there are in locations where nuclear weapons are being made. Another story I've always been fascinated with happened in 1951 when a terrified pilot came face to face with strange-looking alien beings. A pilot, Fred Reagan, was flying in the skies over Georgia when all of a sudden he felt his plane start to move upwards by a mysterious force. And then to his horror, he crashed into an object that was flying right above him. And when Fred woke up, he came face to face with 3 alien beings that were about 3 feet tall that looked like metallic robots in the shape of asparagus. Now these metallic robots apologized to Fred for crashing into him. Then they told him that they had just cured him of his cancer, which Fred didn't even know he had. Then Fred blacked out again and woke up in a field without a scratch on him. But he saw that his plane was now destroyed as the wreckage was all around him. Now, although Fred was cured of his cancer, he did end up dying about a year later from exposure to atomic radiation. Now today, this is a popular story, and it's known as the Georgia Stalks. It was first reported in a paper known as a Flying Saucers Review that was released to the public in the late 1960s. But researchers have stated that they can never find any proof of this story actually happening, making most to believe that it's nothing more than a hoax. But some suspect that maybe the government had covered it up. And one thing is for sure, there have been many eyewitnesses who have claimed to have seen aliens just as bizarre as what Fred did. Until next time, this is Paranormal Junkie. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.